Nobody saw it coming. Not the reporters, not the defense team, not even the judge, who had presided over dozens of high-profile cases and believed he had seen everything. But that day, everything changed. The courtroom had been tense since the day before, when Cassie's testimony left everyone speechless. She spoke of a fairy tale romance that, behind closed doors, was built on control, fear, and emotional abuse. Her voice cracked, but her story was clear. And while her pain shook the room, no one expected what came next. That morning, the mood was heavy. Eyes darted to the door. Cassie sat in the back, visibly shaken but trying to stay composed. Then the door opened, and her mother entered. Her heels struck the wooden floor like war drums. Conversation stopped. Even the air felt still. This woman had been invisible for years. Silent, distant, unknown to the public. But now, she was here. Not just as a mother, but as a witness. Diddy sat at the defense table, unreadable. His jaw locked, his fists clenched. His breathing quickened. Still, he said nothing until everything broke. In one terrifying moment, he stood violently. His chair flew backward. He rushed at her. There was no warning, no words, just a man unraveling. 3 security guards leapt into action. One tripped. Another barely caught his arm. Papers flew. A juror ducked as a water bottle rolled off a table. In the middle of the chaos, Cassie's mother didn't move. She adjusted the microphone calmly. Her face was pale but firm. She had waited for this. She had prepared for it. The judge slammed the gavel over and over, screaming for order. But the damage was already done. Diddy, the man who had spent decades building a brand on discipline and charm, was being dragged from the room like a criminal. He screamed nonsense, words no one understood. Cassie covered her mouth in horror. This wasn't a flashback. This wasn't trauma from the past. This was real. This was now. And everyone had the same question burning in their minds. What does this woman know that made him snap before she said a single word? Her presence alone had cracked him wide open. The room had barely calmed when she began to speak. No dramatic introduction, no practiced performance. Just a woman, a mother, sitting in front of strangers trying to make sense of years spent watching her daughter vanish. She started by talking about Cassie as a teenager. Joyful, talkative, always singing, always dancing in front of the mirror. She had light, her mother said. She dreamed big. Then came the pause, and I watched that light go out. No one moved. Not the jury, not the attorneys, not the crowd behind them. Because what was happening wasn't just testimony. It was a dismantling of the myth the world had built around Sean Diddy Combs. Cassie's mother described odd phone calls. Her daughter's voice, robotic, saying she was fine. Cancelled visits, missed birthdays, messages that said, "I'm okay," when everything in her tone said the opposite. "I asked her once," the mother said, "why don't you leave?" Another pause, and she answered, "Because it's safer to stay than to go." The jury shifted uncomfortably. One member bowed their head. Cassie sat frozen in the back, her hands trembling. It wasn't just memory now. It was confession. A wound being opened in real time. She spoke of long sleeves in the summer, sudden changes in mood, increasing isolation, a wall slowly building around her daughter, one no one could see, but everyone felt. Then she spoke about Diddy. He called me controlling, she said I was meddling. One time during a tour, he banned me from visiting her, said I was a distraction. Her voice cracked, but she pressed on. His presence was heavy, like he controlled the air in the room. Then came the part that silenced everyone. For years, I thought staying close meant protecting her. That if I stayed near, I could keep her safe. But now I see, I had already lost her. Long before I realized what was really happening. Cassie broke. Her shoulders trembled. Her hands covered her face. The room watched as the woman they once saw on red carpets collapsed under the weight of a truth she couldn't unhear. It was no longer just testimony. It was a reckoning. No one dared interrupt. The judge didn't speak. The lawyer sat frozen. The cameras, though silent, recorded every breath, every blink, every tremor in the room. Cassie cried openly now, not from past trauma, but from the present, watching her mother relive every scar she had tried so hard to hide. She wore long sleeves in July, her mother continued. She missed family dinners. She stopped laughing. It was like watching her fade in real time. The mother paused, then said the line that echoed like a gunshot through the stunned courtroom. She thought what she was living through was love. That was the moment Cassie couldn't hold it anymore. A sob escaped her chest. Raw, loud, uncontrollable. She bent forward, her body folding in on itself. No one moved to stop her. No one dared. Because this wasn't performance, this was collapse. Real, crippling, public, and it made the case real. This wasn't just about what happened behind closed doors. It was about what everyone was watching now. A woman crumbling because she could no longer pretend. Cassie wasn't the pop star anymore. She wasn't the polished public figure. She wasn't the face in the photos next to Diddy. She was just a daughter, grieving in real time over the years she had lost. And the mother who had finally spoken for her. Reporters didn't tweet. Jurors didn't blink. Even the defense attorneys sat pale, unsure of what to do. Then came the final blow. When asked why she chose to speak now, the mother didn't hesitate. Because my daughter still thinks what she lived through was love. And I needed her to know it wasn't. A silence louder than any shout swept the room. There were no objections. There were no words. Just the sound of a heart breaking. And a truth finally being set free. News of the courtroom outburst spread like wildfire. Within hours, headlines dominated every major outlet. Diddy attacks witness. Cassie's mother breaks silence. Courtroom chaos shocks nation. The footage, shaky, raw, was played on loop. Diddy, once untouchable, now looked unhinged. No press team could spin this. No publicist could soften the blow. The man who had once charmed the world was caught on video screaming, fighting, being dragged away, like a man with nothing left to lose. And the world noticed. Social media erupted. Hashtags trended worldwide. Judge Cassie speaks. Judge's mother witness. Judge Diddy breakdown. Influencers, celebrities, activists all had something to say. But more than that, the public finally believed. Because now it wasn't just about past stories or rumors. It was about what they had seen with their own eyes. A man trying to silence a woman before she even spoke. The prosecution seized the moment. They filed to revoke Diddy's bail, citing him as unstable and dangerous. They demanded a psychological evaluation. They painted a picture of a man not reacting in grief, but lashing out from a place of deep-seated rage. "This is not a one-time outburst," the prosecutor said. "This is a pattern. This is who he is." The judge agreed. From that point on, he would attend proceedings via video, shackled, flanked by guards. And just like that, the courtroom shifted. The Matu who once controlled rooms with his presence could no longer control anything at all. His lawyers argued it was stress, that the testimony had overwhelmed him, that his behavior wasn't violent, just emotional. But no one bought it, because no one had seen a man broken by sorrow. They'd seen a man enraged by truth. And that image of a calm mother speaking hard truths while her daughter wept had burned itself into the minds of the jury. Now, the question wasn't whether Cassie was telling the truth. It was how long Diddy had managed to hide it. The day after the meltdown, everything changed. Diddy was no longer just a defendant. He was a symbol of everything the world had ignored for too long. The press swarmed the courthouse. Analysts on morning shows called it the turning point. Even late-night comedians, usually too cautious to comment, were talking about it. The footage of him screaming, restrained, eyes wild, had stripped away every layer of celebrity. He looked small, dangerous, exposed. Inside the courtroom, his defense team shifted tactics. They pleaded for compassion, claimed the breakdown was the result of emotional trauma, that Diddy had been pushed too far, that years of pressure had boiled over. But the prosecution wasn't having it. They filed a new petition, requesting the jury consider Diddy's behavior as part of a pattern of psychological abuse. They argued that his courtroom violence confirmed everything Cassie and her mother had described. "This isn't a meltdown," they said. "It's a mask falling off." They presented audio clips, financial records, messages Cassie had sent years ago. Vague, coded, now crystal clear. "I'm fine," she once wrote to her mum. "I'm just tired." But now, they all knew what that meant. The prosecution even claimed Diddy had tried to contact witnesses from inside custody. Secret calls, suspicious payments, messages sent through intermediaries. It wasn't just about guilt anymore. It was about danger. And in the jury's eyes, the trial wasn't just about a past relationship. It was about a man unraveling in real time, and the women trying to break free from his grip. Cassie returned to court with red eyes but stronger steps. She didn't hide behind her hair. She didn't avoid his image on the screen. The collapse had freed her. And when the prosecution asked the mother one final question, "What gave you the strength to speak out?" she turned to her daughter and said, "Because she still thinks what she lived was love. And I needed her to know it wasn't." A hush fell. This wasn't testimony anymore. It was truth. No one left the courtroom right away when that session ended. People sat in silence. Jurors stared at the floor. Even the guards exchanged looks. The kind only shared by those who know they've just witnessed something irreversible. Outside, the internet exploded. Clips of Cassie sobbing, her mother's voice trembling but firm. Diddy's courtroom rampage. Hashtags spread like fire. Justice for Cassie. Christian mother courage. Sigurd break the silence. Celebrities who had once stood beside Diddy quietly unfollowed him. Advocacy groups praised Cassie. Talk shows booked psychologists to analyze the power dynamics of abuse. What had started as a scandal was now a social reckoning. And Diddy, he watched everything from a cell, shackled, silent. His face appeared on a monitor during court sessions. Tight-lipped, eyes fixed, still. But it wasn't calm. It was fear. By the final day, the courtroom no longer felt like a room's. It felt like a waiting room between truth and judgment. Gone were the whispered conversations, the exchanged glances between attorneys. Now, even the walls seemed to hold their breath. Cassie arrived with her mother, no makeup, no glamour, just presence. Her eyes showed fatigue, but not weakness. She was no longer walking in with fear, she was walking in with finality. The prosecution delivered their closing statements with quiet fire. They didn't repeat the worst moments. They didn't need to. They simply reminded the jury of what they had all witnessed. A woman destroyed, a man unmasked. "Ladies and gentlemen," the prosecutor said, "you don't have to imagine who he is. He showed you." Silence. Then came the defense, clinging to the last scraps of their strategy. They talked about pressure, about how Diddy had built an empire under relentless scrutiny. They tried to reframe the rage as emotion, not instability. But it didn't land. Because the jury wasn't weighing music or business. They were weighing fear. They had watched a woman break in front of them. They had watched a man explode. They had seen control masquerading as charisma, rage dressed in success. When the jury left to deliberate, the air felt electrified. People outside held signs, survivors, advocates, curious citizens. They weren't protesting, they were bearing witness. Then, just 3 hours later, the jury returned. Cassie didn't flinch. She held her mother's hand and waited. The foreperson stood, cleared their throat, and read the words that would change everything. "We find the defendant liable." No one cheered. No one clapped. They just exhaled. Cassie closed her eyes. Her mother squeezed her hand. In that moment, there were no winners, no applause, only truth finally standing in the open. Outside the courtroom, the world felt different. Morning sunlight bathed the plaza in a calm that contrasted sharply with the storm of the day. Reporters jostled for position. Cameras clicked, but Cassie stepped through the doors with her head held high. She didn't make statements. She didn't offer sound bites. She simply walked to her mother's side, and together they pushed through the crowd. Every eye followed them. Every phone recorded. But Cassie's focus was elsewhere. She was listening to the city waking up, to the distant hum of life carrying on, to the promise that her own life could finally carry on. Days later, the media landscape shifted. Opinion pieces praised the courage of a mother and daughter. Podcasts replayed the testimony, analyzing every word. Survivors around the globe shared their own stories, inspired by Cassie's decision to speak. Social media transformed from shock to solidarity. Cassie, meanwhile, retreated from the glare. She returned to her daughter's side. She cooked breakfast in a small apartment she now called home. She read bedtime stories aloud. She danced in the living room. These moments were simple, but to her they were monumental. Legally, the ruling set a precedent. Powerful figures across multiple industries took heed. Questions about privilege, power, and secrecy dominated boardrooms. Contracts were re-examined. End days were scrutinized. A ripple effect began one that extended far beyond one courtroom. Cassie's mother founded a support network for voices without platforms. A group of volunteers, survivors, and legal advocates dedicated to ensuring that when someone says, "This happened to me," they are heard, believed, and protected. And Diddy, he faced not only legal consequences, but a cultural reckoning. His name still carried weight, but it also carried a question mark. Would he rebuild? Would the world ever see him the same way again? That remained to be seen. For Cassie, the question was different. Who would she become? She realized her identity was no longer defined by his shadow. She was a mother, a survivor, a voice for change. The ending she had been given by a courtroom would become the beginning of a new story, one she would write herself. In the end, the trial wasn't a conclusion. It was a catalyst. It reminded everyone that truth has power beyond verdicts, that courage can reshape culture, that a single voice, uttered in fear and hope, can reverberate around the world. And on unguarded nights, when the city is quiet and her daughter sleeps, Cassie still whispers to herself, "I survived. I spoke. I am free." And that, she knows, is the most profound verdict of all. In the quiet days that followed the verdict, Cassie chose not to speak to the media. She didn't need to. Instead, she cradled her daughter in the morning light, whispering stories of strength, not survival, not about what they escaped, but about what they are becoming. Because healing is not loud. It's a bedtime song, a shared laugh, a mother's arms that promise, you will grow in truth. You will never inherit silence. That's how Cassie knew. Her final act wasn't just survival. It was breaking the cycle. It was rewriting the story for the next generation.